Imagine having to tell a story so hypnotic, so utterly spellbinding, that it is the only thing keeping the executioner's heavy blade from severing your neck. Welcome to the true, blood-soaked origins of the 1001 Nights. This is not the sanitized, colorful fairy tale you're told as an innocent child. This is a dark, psychological thriller of betrayal, murder, and a mind descending into absolute, irreversible madness. Our tale begins in the ancient, dust-swept lands of India and China, ruled by a legendary dynasty of formidable kings. King Shahryar, the elder brother, sat upon the greatest throne, beloved by his vast people and revered for his unyielding justice. His younger brother, King Shahryar, ruled the distant, fragrant lands of Persian Samarkand. For 20 long years, they lived in absolute splendor, completely untouched by the cruelties of the outside world, commanding massive armies and loyal subjects. But peace, in this ancient, unforgiving world, is merely a fragile glass illusion waiting to shatter. A deep, gnawing, physical longing grew in King Shahryar's heart to see his beloved brother once more. He could no longer bear the agonizing silence of the great distance between their sprawling empires. He dispatched his grand vizier across the treacherous, burning deserts to fetch him, carrying scrolls of love and grand royal invitations. The vizier rode relentlessly until he reached the gates of Samarkand, delivering the simple summons that would unknowingly seal the bloody fate of thousands. Shahryar joyfully agreed to the journey, ordering his tents of spun gold to be packed and his finest beasts to be burdened with extravagant gifts. Little did these powerful men know, this simple act of brotherly affection would plunge their empires into a terrifying ocean of innocent blood. What unspeakable, mind-breaking horror could possibly turn a beloved, just king into a ruthless mass murderer? The desert winds howled like dying animals through the courtyard as King Shahryar prepared his grand royal caravan. He appointed his most trusted vizier as the temporary ruler of the land and rode out under the suffocating, heavy heat of the afternoon sun. The anticipation of seeing his brother filled his chest with a rare, almost childlike excitement. But as midnight draped the world in thick, suffocating shadows, a nagging, uncomfortable thought pierced his mind. He suddenly realized he had forgotten a priceless pearl, a secret gift meant solely for his brother's hands. Leaving his massive protective guard at the desert camp, he slipped quietly back into his royal palace under the heavy cover of darkness. The marble corridors were eerily, deathly silent, heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and an unspoken, creeping deceit. He pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of his private, royal bedchamber. The sight that greeted him in the pale, cold moonlight stopped the very breath in his throat and froze the blood in his veins. His beautiful, deeply beloved wife lay tangled in his own silk sheets, bathed in the soft, silver glow of the moon. And she was not alone in that bed. She was tightly wrapped in the passionate, sweaty embrace of a lowly black slave from the palace kitchens. In an instant, the entire world went black before Shahryar's eyes, his heart shattering into 1,000 jagged, irreparable pieces. If this filthy, disgusting treason occurs while I am barely past the city gates, What vile acts happen when I am truly miles away? With a cold, violently trembling hand, he drew his heavy, gleaming steel sword from its jeweled scabbard. He did not hesitate for a second, nor did he speak a single word of warning to the treacherous lovers. He brought the heavy blade down with terrifying force, slaughtering them both in the bed, leaving their blood to soak deep into the royal silk. But the dark stain of this betrayal was not something that a river of blood could ever wash away. How does a man continue to breathe when his very soul has been gutted by the one he loved the most? He rode furiously into the black night, the warm blood of his wife still drying on the cold steel of his blade. For days and nights, the grand caravan marched across the unforgiving dunes until they finally reached the majestic capital of King Shahryar. The massive city erupted in joyous, deafening celebration, decorated from wall to wall in vibrant silks to welcome the younger brother. Shahryar ran out to embrace him, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated joy and brotherly love. But King Shahzaman was now nothing but a hollow shell, a walking, breathing ghost, haunted by the grotesque image permanently burned into his mind. His skin slowly turned a sickly, pale yellow, and his once strong, muscular body began to wither away like a dying flower. The grand, extravagant feasts tasted like dry ash in his mouth, and the sweetest, oldest wines burned like bitter poison. Shahryar watched his brother deteriorate day by day, deeply concerned but assuming the harsh desert journey and severe homesickness were to blame. He asked no probing questions, generously allowing his brother to rest and suffer in suffocating, polite silence. Until one bright morning, Shahryar could bear the sight of his dying brother no longer. "My brother, your face is horribly yellowed, and I watch the life drain from your veins," he said with deep sorrow. Shahzaman looked at the floor and only whispered back, "There is a deep, rotting ulcer inside my heart." Desperate to cure him, Shahryar proposed a grand 10-day royal hunt, hoping the raw thrill of the chase would revive his dead spirit. But Shahzaman refused the offer, choosing to lock himself away in the lonely, quiet guest palace. And it was in this very isolation that he would witness something that would break his reality forever. Shahzaman sat entirely alone, staring vacantly through the ornate wooden lattices of the high palace windows. The window perfectly overlooked the king's private, strictly forbidden garden, a lush paradise of blooming exotic flowers and singing birds. Suddenly, the heavy, secret doors of the inner palace swung open with a soft creak. Out stepped 20 incredibly beautiful slave girls and 20 strong, muscular male slaves. And walking confidently among them, radiating a breathtaking, hypnotic beauty, was the queen herself. Shahryar's own wife, the most powerful and supposedly pure woman in the entire empire. They casually gathered around the shimmering, crystal-clear waters of the grand central fountain. Slowly, deliberately, and without a shred of shame, they let their luxurious silken garments fall to the soft grass. The queen's voice suddenly pierced the quiet serenity of the garden as she loudly called out a name. "Masood!" she cried out, her voice dripping with raw desire. A massive black slave immediately stepped forward from the group, his eyes burning with an intense, familiar lust. He wrapped his thick arms around the queen, and she eagerly, desperately, returned his embrace. Right there, beneath the open sky and the watchful eyes of the gods, they fell to the ground in a passionate, animalistic frenzy. The others quickly followed suit, turning the immaculate royal garden into a chaotic, writhing scene of forbidden lust. Shah-Zaman watched, utterly paralyzed by shock, as the afternoon sun slowly crawled across the sky, highlighting their sins. But what twisted, dark comfort did this horrific, mind-bending sight bring to the broken king in the window? The twist in the human mind is sometimes as cruel as it is entirely unpredictable. Watching his great brother's wife commit an even more massive and brazen treason, Shah-Zaman's heavy, crushing depression instantly vanished. By Allah, my personal calamity is far lighter, far less humiliating than this absolute disaster, he whispered to himself with a dark smile. Suddenly, his appetite returned with a ravenous, unstoppable vengeance. When King Shahryar finally returned from his long hunt, he was stunned to find his brother eating heartily, his hollow cheeks flushed with healthy color. Astounded and overjoyed, Shahryar practically begged to know what miracle had cured his mysterious illness. Shah-Zaman reluctantly confessed the bloody, secret murder of his own wife, explaining the initial cause of his deep despair. But he flatly, stubbornly refused to explain the sudden, miraculous recovery of his spirit. Shahryar pushed him, demanding the absolute truth by the sacred, unforgiving name of Allah. So, cornered by his oath, Shah-Zaman spilled the venomous, earth-shattering secret, recounting every detail of the grotesque scene in the garden. Shahryar's entire world, everything he believed in, violently shattered into dust. He refused to believe it, demanding to see this impossible treason with his own two eyes. They faked another hunting trip, sneaking quietly back into the palace to watch from that very same hidden window. And the agonizing, humiliating truth played out in the garden exactly as Shah-Zaman had described. The king's powerful mind simply snapped, his sanity flying away like a frightened, panicked bird. "Arise!" he hissed to his brother, his voice shaking with absolute terror. "We abandon our kingdoms right now. We will wander the earth until we find someone whose suffering is greater than ours, or we will seek death." Where does a broken, humiliated king run when his entire universe has been proven a lie? The two disgraced kings stripped themselves of their jeweled robes and royal identities, fleeing the city through a dusty, secret door. They walked through blistering, skin-burning days and freezing, bone-chilling nights, driven forward by a madness they could not even name. Their desperate journey eventually brought them to a lush, green meadow situated right beside a dark, violently churning, salty sea. A massive, ancient tree stood proudly in the center of the meadow, its thick roots drinking from a crystal-clear, fresh spring. Exhausted beyond human limits, they collapsed beneath its heavy, leafy branches to rest their aching, weary bones. But the silence of the meadow was suddenly broken as the calm sea began to boil and froth with an unnatural, terrifying violence. The ground trembled violently beneath their bare feet as the dark water violently split open. A towering, swirling black pillar of water and smoke rose from the depths, scraping the very vault of the gray sky. Terrified out of their minds, the brothers scrambled frantically up the thick trunk of the ancient tree, hiding deep among the dense leaves. The massive pillar shifted onto the sand, solidifying into a monstrous, terrifying jinni, a creature ripped straight from nightmares. He was a towering, muscular beast with a head the size of a dome and a chest broad as a mountainside. and upon his enormous, terrifying head, he effortlessly carried a massive, heavily locked wooden chest. He waded heavily onto the shore, the ground shaking with every step, and dropped the chest directly beneath their hiding place. What ancient, terrifying horror was kept locked inside this magical, watery tomb? The royal brothers held their breath, clinging to the rough branches like frightened, helpless mice. The monstrous Jinni retrieved a heavy iron key from his belt and slowly opened 7 glittering, magical locks on the chest. From deep inside, he pulled out a smaller, intricately carved wooden box lined with velvet. He snapped the box open, and an angelic, delicate figure stepped out onto the grass. She was a young woman of impossible, breathtaking beauty, radiating a soft light like the morning sun. The giant Jinni looked down at her with obsessive, terrifyingly possessive eyes. "O queen of the noble women, the one I violently stole on the night of her wedding, I wish to sleep," he growled with a voice like thunder. He laid his grotesque, massive head upon her delicate, fragile lap and instantly fell into a deep, earth-shaking slumber. The woman slowly looked up into the branches, her piercing, calculated eyes locking directly onto the 2 trembling kings. Gently, with practiced care, she slid the genie's heavy head off her lap onto the soft grass and stood up beneath the tree. Using frantic, aggressive hand signals, she ordered the terrified brothers to come down from the tree immediately. "We beg you by Allah, spare us from the wrath of this monster," they whispered down to her, shaking with fear. But her beautiful face twisted into a cruel, demanding, and utterly terrifying smile. "If you do not come down and sleep with me right now, I will scream and wake the terrifying Ifrit. He will tear your flesh from your bones and give you a slow, excruciatingly painful death. How far will a desperate man go when forced to choose between his honor and a demon's wrath?" Paralyzed by the overwhelming dread of the sleeping giant beneath them, the kings reluctantly climbed down the tree. The beautiful woman lay back on the soft grass, her eyes gleaming with a dark, triumphant, and manipulative fire. "Pierce me hard," she commanded in a harsh whisper, "or I swear I will scream and wake the demon." King Shahryar, shaking uncontrollably with terror, begged his younger brother to go first. Shahzaman fiercely refused, pushing his brother forward in a desperate, silent, and pathetic physical argument. The woman narrowed her dark eyes, violently warning them that their cowardly hesitation would be their brutal end. And so, driven purely by the primal fear of being ripped apart and devoured, both mighty brothers obeyed her terrifying command. When the grim, forced deed was finally done, she stood up and smiled a cold, victorious, chilling smile. She reached deep into her silken robes and pulled out a heavy, bulging leather pouch. From the pouch, she poured out a dazzling, massive necklace made entirely of men's signet rings. 570 rings clinked together loudly in the quiet, tense meadow. "Do you know exactly what these rings are?" she asked, her voice dripping with venomous pride and dark amusement. "The owners of all these rings had their way with me, right here, sitting on the very horns of this foolish, sleeping demon. Now, give me your rings as well, so I may add them to my grand collection." What is the true, terrifying nature of a woman held captive in the crushing black bottom of the sea? The defeated kings silently pulled the royal rings from their fingers, handing them over, their minds struggling to comprehend the depth of this betrayal. "This incredibly powerful Ifrit stole me on my wedding night," she scoffed. looking down at the sleeping monster. He locked me in a box, placed that box inside a chest, sealed it with 7 magical locks, and buried me under the crushing, roaring waves. But this stupid beast did not know that when a woman truly desires something, absolutely no force in heaven or hell can stop her. Love is but a deceptive mask, she recited softly, and their sacred vows are as empty as the blowing wind. The brothers backed away slowly, their broken souls heavier than the stones resting on the seafloor. Here lies a monstrous jinni, possessing godly magical powers, yet his betrayal is 1,000 times worse than what we suffered. They turned their backs on the churning sea and ran desperately back toward their home capital. The dark revelation did not bring them peace or acceptance. It brought them a cold, absolute, terrifying ruthlessness. King Shahryar stormed back into his grand palace, the air around him thick with his impending, unstoppable wrath. He drew his heavy sword and personally severed the head of his queen, her dark blood pooling instantly on the immaculate marble floors. He slaughtered the complicit slaves. He slaughtered the lying handmaidens, leaving not a single witness breathing in the halls. But the blinding thirst for vengeance is a fire that cannot be easily quenched by the blood of the guilty alone. What unspeakable, horrific vow did the mad king make as he stood alone in that bloody, silent throne room? From that bloody day forward, King Shahryar's heart turned to solid, impenetrable ice. He truly believed that no woman on the entire earth could ever be trusted, and he swore a dark oath to punish them all. Every single night, he demanded a pure, innocent virgin to be brought forcefully to his royal bed. He would take her virtue in the terrifying, silent dark of the night, and at the very first light of dawn, he would drag her by her hair and hand her over to the royal executioner to be beheaded. This horrific, relentless cycle of innocent death continued unbroken for 3 long, agonizing years. The great city wept endlessly, the people wailed in the streets, and desperate families fled in terror to hide their young daughters. Soon, there was not a single young woman left in the entire city fit for marriage or life. The exhausted Grand Vizier walked the empty, silent streets, a heavy dread resting permanently on his stooped shoulders. He could find no girl for the mad king tonight, and he knew his failure meant his own brutal, immediate execution. He returned to his quiet home, a broken, defeated man simply waiting for the executioner's blade to fall upon his neck. But he had 2 beautiful daughters of his own, and the eldest was named Scheherazade. She had read the ancient forbidden books, the lost histories of forgotten kings, and she possessed a mind as sharp as a diamond. Seeing her father's utter despair, she stepped forward with a chilling, suicidal proposition. "Marry me to this murderous king tonight, father," she declared with terrifying calmness. "Either I survive the dawn, or I become the bloody ransom for the daughters of the Muslims, saving them all from his wrath." And here, in the shadow of the executioner's block, begins the most dangerous game of psychological manipulation the world has ever known.